Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is a very special episode because Joshua Orpin boards the mothership. You know him as Superboy on Titans on HBOMax. Come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Orpin. Thanks so much for to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Hey, not at all. Thank you very much for having me. I see that you're in space right now.
Yes, I'm enjoying hanging around the stars.
Oh, looks nice.
So you're now in your third season of playing Connor Kent, Superboy. How has your view of the character changed over the last 3 years?
Oh, geez. Wow. It's changed quite a bit. Personally, I've just grown to love the character more and more with each season. Every time I get to come back to the character, it's a privilege and a joy to step back into those boots and to see what the writers have for me. I think in particular, season 4, as the viewers are seeing at the moment, Connor has a lot to work through, and I got some juicy stuff to work with and to chew on. And I think that I did have a blast with a lot of the material that I was given this season, and I hope that's apparent to the viewers.
Now, you got to play 3 kind of versions of the same character in season 4. You got regular Connor, you got possessed Connor, and you have kind of like, I don't know, mean Connor, maybe we can call him. So what has that experience been like, playing 3 versions of the same guy?
It's just so much fun. I mean, it's not often you get that kind of variation within a single character. One of the things I love about Connor is that he's so multifaceted, and being able to show those different aspects of him at different times, at different points in the story, is just such a rare opportunity. And I'm very grateful for it. In particular, I think that stuff in episode 4 where he was possessed by or cursed by Mother Mayhem, and just completely acting out of character with the big distended stomach and all those scenes back and forth with Dick. Some of that dialogue was just so much fun. It's not often you get to be that brutal with no consequences. So yeah, I mean, what can I say other than I really enjoyed myself, particularly in episode 4.
So is it safe to say that's your favorite version of Superboy, the possessed one?
I wouldn't even call it a version of Superboy, to be honest, because it was something else entirely that had kind of taken over his mind and body. But I certainly relished that opportunity when I was given that dialogue to really go a little more wacky with it, a little more, I don't know, it's just a little more outlandish with some of those line deliveries. And I was happy to see that they kept a lot of that stuff in there in the final cut.
And you've also had some fantastic scenes as well with Titus Welliver, who plays Lex Luthor, who is, for those who don't know, is technically sort of like your father, half father on the show of Superboy. So what was it like playing with Titus?
He's fantastic. He just came in and just stepped right into the role and brought an immediate gravitas and a sense of weight and realism to the character that we've seen in various forms in other media throughout the years. I do have a strong bias, but Titus's interpretation of Lex is my favorite live action version of the character. So it was very, very exciting to step into a room with him and get to play some scenes. And I think we can spoil what happens now because it was back in episode 1, but tune out now if you haven't seen any of season 4. Spoiler alert. Okay, so Titus, Lex Luthor, was killed off the very first episode he appears at the end of episode 1 of season 4. So yeah, it was sudden. We really had to make the most of the time that we had together, and I think that we did that. We had some fantastic scenes, or really just the one scene between he and I. But to be honest with you, one of my favorite scenes of the entire season is that first meeting between Starfire and Lex that immediately follows that great hallway fight sequence that she has as she makes her way through the the Luthor security and ends up having that conversation with him. One of my favorite scenes. I think it's fantastic. But just generally speaking, I think he was a fantastic Lex Luthor, and I don't know how this could happen, but I'd love to see more of him in the role.
So, because as we said, he's genetically connected to Lex Luthor. Does watching how Titus performs that role affect how you thought about how to perform aspects of Superboy going forward?
Yeah, a little bit. I made some observations of Titus and what he was doing, and I thought it might be cool to implement a few of those mannerisms in some subtle ways here and there, particularly in the episode coming up, episode 10, where Connor really finds himself stepping into those shoes and stepping into that role of the CEO of LexCorp. And I feel like more than me, Josh, as an actor, trying to imitate or mimic anything Titus was doing, what I wanted to come across there was that it was Connor, having met Lex, trying to implement a few of those things and mimic him. So it's more so Connor's interpretation of how to be more like Lex than it is my own interpretation of how to be more like Titus, if that makes sense. I think Connor's really doing his best to emulate a little bit of what he saw during that first and only meeting.
And I think another cool aspect explored in season 4 about Superboy is the idea of him as a protector, because he kind of has like a crisis of confidence after losing to his magic a few times. Do you think the issue that he has is that it's more of a fear for his teammates, protecting his teammates, or do you think it's living up to his namesake Superman that's bothering him the most?
Definitely both. I think it's mostly the latter for him, though, because as you say, he's humbled pretty quickly from the get-go. Mother Mayhem kind of just knocks him flat on his back, and he doesn't really know what hit him. That's something he's never really experienced before, and that's a real blow to his ego. He's never really lost a fight. He's never really been hurt physically. From his point of view, he hasn't been alive that long objectively, but from his point of view, there's nothing that can really stand up to him in that way in a physical fight. And that really rocks him to the core. And I think the accumulation of a few of those instances, battles against Mother Mayhem, where he tries and fails to defeat her, those experiences contribute to the kind of mental breakdown he has at the beginning of episode 6 of season 4 and triggers that emotional response to the trauma of those events that lead him down the path that he's currently on. So shaving the head, putting on that, it's almost like a suit of armor that he puts on, that Lex Luthor persona to kind of protect himself, protect that fragile ego inside. There is a definite vulnerability that we can see underneath that facade. And it's one of those things that's apparent to everybody else except for Connor. And that's just something he's going to have to work through.
Do you think it's fair that he's putting himself through that much pressure and stress of losing and having to deal with that? Because it does seem like at one point or another, every hero does at some point get their butts kicked by someone. Do you think it's fair or not for that, what he's putting himself under?
He certainly puts himself under a lot of pressure, but to a certain degree, I don't think that is necessarily his fault. From the moment he was born, he's been told that he's the son of these two great people, these two legends, Lex Luthor and Superman. And particularly with Superman, those are big shoes to fill, and that's a big reputation to try to live up to. And whether that is implicit pressure or he's kind of inferred that from other people, he's felt that from other people or not, it's definitely something that weighs on him heavily, and he wants to live up to that legacy of Superman's reputation. And he wears the S, he wears that crest on his chest everywhere he goes, and that definitely that means something to him. He wants to make sure that he's earned that. So he's in a constant battle, feeling like he's not enough and he's not doing enough to live up to that. And certainly that pressure is a contributing factor to now we're starting to see the cracks.
Now, another interesting part that gets brought up in the first episode, and I'm wondering if it comes out later, is the issue with Superman. In other words, he was supposed to meet Superman, he doesn't. Do you think Superman's intentionally like avoiding this guy? I mean, how's that impacting Superboy's psyche, knowing that I guess his other dad is kind of ditching him at the moment?
That's an interesting interpretation. I don't think so, personally. I think that Superman genuinely had to rush off to an emergency, and he does what he does, and he has to prioritize, and these things happen when you're Superman. But it definitely did hurt Connor's feelings a little bit. And while he can understand why, and Bernard's explanation of where Superman was at that time and what he was doing left him with a sense of awe and a sense of longing to meet Superman even more than he was experiencing prior to that. I think it's an interesting interpretation to say that maybe Superman was avoiding that first meeting. Let me think about that for a second. I don't think it's true in this case. I know they played with some ideas similar to that in the Young Justice animated show, where Superman didn't necessarily approve of Connor, who he was, how he was created. In our show, I think we have a little bit more of a mature and a benevolent Superman. So I think he would have empathy for Connor, and I think he would be willing to meet him. But yeah, there is a certain sense of disappointment that Connor feels in those moments, in that moment, and being let down. He had a great sense of anticipation for that first meeting. So yeah, I get the feeling that if Superman had been there and met him on that day, then maybe we could have avoided a lot of the pain and suffering that we're witnessing now.
If he had met Superman, do you think his feelings about Lex would have been different if he had met? Because at the moment of meeting Lex, he only has ever met now that one family member. Would that whole thing have been totally changed if he actually had a chance to meet Superman instead first?
I think it would have been different. I think that Connor still would have wanted to meet Lex, but I think maybe his expectations of Lex would have been tempered by that first meeting with Superman. And as I say, this version of Superman on our show that I like to imagine is one who was a little more mature. He's experienced a lot. He's been Superman for a long time, and I feel like he would have provided Connor with some deeper wisdom in regard to that first meeting. So I think Connor would have approached that meeting differently, having had that preemptive advice from Superman. I don't think Superman would have stopped him from meeting Lex, because he would have understood how Connor felt regarding meeting his creator. But I think it would have gone down a little differently, but perhaps it would have ended the same way that it did.
So what can our listeners look forward to on the final episodes of Titan?
Wow. As we know, the show is coming to a close, so we're wrapping everything up. This is the final season of Titans. For my money, the way that we ended this season was incredibly satisfying and an appropriate farewell to these characters that we've grown to love over the past 4 seasons. I felt very satisfied by the ending for Connor in particular. I think that the character arc that he experiences this season is it's a roller coaster ride, but where he ends up, I think makes sense, and I think is satisfying both for me as an actor, and I hope for the audience. I don't really want to give anything away, but I will say that it's big, it's satisfying, it's exciting, and yeah, I can't wait for people to see it.
Well, I can't wait to see it myself. Mr. Orpin, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.